Welcome back to Space Universe. Today we are covering a story that involves a man who knew the secrets of some of the most powerful people on the planet. A man who was arrested and placed in one of the most secure federal jails in America to await trial. A man who, if he had gone to trial, could have exposed names that would have shaken governments. And then one morning he was found dead in his locked cell. The official conclusion was suicide. But what the camera footage actually shows and what the government's own official reports documented about that night raises questions that have never been fully answered. This is the complete documented story of the night Jeffrey Epstein died. Everything in this video comes directly from official government reports, court documents, and verified journalism. No speculation. Just the documented facts. To understand why this story matters, you first need to understand who Jeffrey Epstein was and why the entire world was watching his case. Jeffrey Epstein was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1953. He grew up in a working-class family and eventually worked his way into the world of elite finance. By the 1980s and 1990s he had become extraordinarily wealthy through methods that were never fully explained. He managed money for some of the wealthiest people in the world. He had a private island in the Caribbean called Little St. James. He had a mansion in Manhattan. He had a ranch in New Mexico. He had a home in Palm Beach, Florida. And he had a private jet that became known in media reports as the Lolita Express because of who was allegedly traveling on it and why. In 2008, Epstein was convicted in Florida of soliciting prostitution from a minor and served 13 months in a county jail under a plea deal that was widely criticized at the time as extraordinarily lenient. The prosecutor who negotiated that deal was a man named Alexander Acosta, who later became the United States Secretary of Labor under President Donald Trump. The deal Acosta gave Epstein was so controversial that it eventually led to Acosta's resignation from the cabinet in 2019 after the terms of the agreement became public. The agreement had given Epstein and his co-conspirators immunity from federal prosecution for crimes they had committed in Florida. It had been kept secret from Epstein's victims in violation of the law. A federal judge later ruled that the agreement had been handled unlawfully. But by then over a decade had passed. On July 6, 2019, federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York arrested Epstein again. The new charges were sex trafficking of minors and sex trafficking conspiracy. The indictment alleged that between 2002 and 2005 Epstein paid girls as young as 14 years old to engage in sex acts with him at his homes in Florida and New York. He pleaded not guilty. He was denied bail. He was taken to the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan. The MCC, as it is known, is a federal detention facility that has housed some of the most high-profile defendants in American legal history. It sits in downtown Manhattan, a few blocks from the federal courthouse. Epstein was placed in the Special Housing Unit, which is a more secure and isolated section of the jail. The world understood immediately what this trial could mean. Epstein had connections to dozens of extraordinarily powerful people in politics, finance, royalty, and entertainment. His address books and flight logs contained the names of presidents, princes, CEOs, and celebrities. A trial would have meant testimony under oath. It would have meant the public disclosure of evidence. It would have meant the naming of names. The whole world was watching. And then 37 days after his arrest, everything stopped. On the night of August 9, 2019, the Metropolitan Correctional Center was operating under conditions that would later be described in an official government report as a combination of negligence, misconduct, and poor job performance. Here is what the Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General officially documented and confirmed in their June 2023 report. Epstein had been placed on suicide watch on July 23, 2019, after he was found on the floor of his cell with marks on his neck. 17 days later, on July 29, he was removed from suicide watch after jail officials determined he was no longer a threat to himself. The MCC Psychology Department had specifically instructed in writing that Epstein must be kept in a cell with another inmate at all times. This was a documented written requirement. His cellmate at the time of the July 23 incident was a former law enforcement officer who was also awaiting trial. On August 9, that cellmate was transferred to a different housing unit. No replacement cellmate was assigned. Epstein was left alone in his cell in direct violation of the written instruction from the prison's own psychology department. This is not disputed. It is in the official government report. That same night, the two correctional officers whose job it was to check on inmates in the special housing unit every 30 minutes did not conduct those checks. The OIG report found that no required 30-minute rounds were conducted after approximately 10:40 p.m. on August 9. No required inmate counts were conducted after 4 p.m. that day. The guards were later found to have falsified their logbooks. They signed documents claiming they had conducted the required checks when surveillance footage showed they had not. Both officers were eventually criminally charged with falsifying federal records. Their charges were later dismissed after they entered into deferred prosecution agreements. One of those guards, according to reports, was not even a detention guard. They had been temporarily assigned from another prison role. According to reporting by the New York Times, both guards had fallen asleep during their shifts. Now here is where the camera footage comes in. And this is where the documented facts become genuinely extraordinary. The Metropolitan Correctional Center had a security camera system that covered the special housing unit. There were 11 cameras in and around the section of the jail where Epstein was being held. When investigators attempted to review the footage from the night of August 9 and August 10 to understand what had happened, they discovered the following. The MCC's digital video recorder system known as DVR2 had experienced a malfunction on July 29, 2019. Because of this malfunction, approximately 75 cameras connected to that DVR had stopped recording their live feeds. The Bureau of Prisons did not discover this failure until August 8, 2019, 10 days after it happened, when staff attempted to review footage completely unrelated to Epstein. 2 days later, Epstein was dead. Of the 11 cameras in and around the special housing unit where Epstein was held, 10 were not recording due to the malfunctioning hard drives. The single camera inside the common area of the SHU that was recording was positioned on an upper tier and showed only a sliver of the staircase leading to Epstein's tier. No camera captured the interior of his cell. No camera captured his cell door. The most critical footage from the most critical night simply did not exist. The DVR system experienced a malfunction on July 29, 2019, then a motherboard failure on August 8, and then a hard drive breakdown on August 10, the exact day Epstein was found dead. 3 separate failures across 12 days culminating on the morning of his death. What happened next with the physical DVR equipment is also documented. When investigators arrived at the MCC after Epstein's death, they needed to try to recover whatever footage might remain on the damaged drives. A prison electronics technician was working on the DVR system. An FBI agent arrived on scene. The prison warden requested the footage. The technician who was working on the system warned the FBI agent and prison personnel explicitly on the record that replacing the damaged hard drives would wipe all data remaining on the system. There were no backups. Despite this warning, the FBI agent removed the DVR. All footage from the relevant period was gone. Documents obtained by CNN revealed that the DOJ had footage from 147 cameras from the prison covering a 24-hour period before and after Epstein died, totaling over 8 terabytes of data. The internal documents indicate that the footage from cameras in the special housing unit did not reveal anything significant since those cameras were not active at the time. Then in February 2026, newly released DOJ documents added another layer to the story. Investigators reviewing footage from the MCC noted an orange-colored figure moving up the stairway toward Epstein's locked housing tier at approximately 10:39 p.m. on August 9, 2019. An internal FBI memorandum described the figure as possibly an inmate, while a separate review by the DOJ Office of Inspector General concluded it may have been a corrections officer carrying orange linen or bedding. Independent video analysts consulted by CBS News said the movement appeared more consistent with an inmate or someone wearing an orange prison uniform, though this interpretation was not adopted in the official conclusion. On the morning of August 10, 2019, at approximately 6:30 am, corrections officers making rounds discovered Epstein unresponsive in his locked cell. Officer Michael Thomas, who was later criminally charged in the case, said when he saw Epstein hanging from the bed, he said, "We are going to be in a lot of trouble." The report also noted that Epstein had made an unrecorded call on a landline not monitored by prison communications the evening before his death. He told officers he was calling his mother. His mother had died before that. Epstein was transported to a nearby hospital where he was pronounced dead. New York City Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Barbara Sampson conducted a 4-hour autopsy and ruled his death a suicide by hanging. The medical examiner concluded that he had hanged himself using a sheet or shirt fashioned into a noose tied to the frame of his bunk bed. But the forensic conclusions did not go unchallenged. Epstein's family hired one of the most respected forensic pathologists in the United States. His name was Dr. Michael Baden, and he had served as the chief medical examiner of New York City himself. He had observed the official autopsy on behalf of Epstein's legal team. On October 30, 2019, Baden issued a report stating that Epstein's neck injuries were much more consistent with homicidal strangulation than with suicide. According to Baden, the neck wound was in the center of Epstein's neck, not under the mandibles as in a typical hanging. Baden said this pattern is more common when a victim is strangled by a wire or cord. He also noted that although there was blood on Epstein's neck, it was absent on the bedsheet that was said to be the ligature. YouTube. The medical examiner who performed the official autopsy responded to these claims and detailed for the OIG why Epstein's injuries were more consistent with and indicative of a suicide by hanging rather than a homicide by strangulation. The medical examiner also noted the absence of debris under Epstein's fingernails, marks on his hands, contusions to his knuckles, or bruises on his body that would have been expected if Epstein had been in a struggle prior to detention. The debate between these two forensic conclusions, suicide versus homicide, has never been fully resolved to the satisfaction of everyone involved. What is not debated is what the government's own official investigations concluded about the conditions that surrounded his detention. The DOJ Office of Inspector General found that the combination of negligence, misconduct, and outright job performance failures by MCC staff all contributed to an environment in which arguably one of the most notorious inmates in the Bureau of Prisons custody was provided with the opportunity to take his own life. Multiple Bureau of Prisons employees submitted false documents claiming they had performed required counts and rounds when they had not. Several MCC staff members lacked candor when questioned by the OIG about their actions. In June 2023, the Department of Justice Inspector General officially affirmed that Epstein died by suicide after reviewing 100,000 documents and interviewing dozens of witnesses. The FBI reached the same conclusion. In July 2025, the DOJ and FBI released a formal memo stating that after a thorough investigation, FBI investigators concluded that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center on August 10, 2019. The same memo confirmed that a systematic review revealed no incriminating client list and no credible evidence that Epstein blackmailed his associates. But here is what we are left with when you look at the complete picture. The most famous prisoner in America at the time of his death. A man whose trial could have exposed some of the most powerful people in the world. Found dead in his locked cell 37 days after his arrest before a single day of trial testimony. His cellmate removed the night before his death in violation of written prison policy. Both guards on duty asleep and later charged with falsifying records. 10 out of 11 cameras in his section of the prison not recording due to a malfunction that began 12 days before his death and was not repaired. The one camera that was recording showing only a partial view of a staircase. An orange figure on that staircase at 10:39 p.m. whose identity was never definitively established. The DVR equipment containing whatever remaining data existed removed by an FBI agent after being warned that doing so would erase everything. And a forensic dispute between the official medical examiner and a private pathologist hired by his own family that was never conclusively settled in the public record. The official conclusion is suicide. That conclusion comes from the New York City medical examiner, the FBI, and the Department of Justice, all of whom reviewed the same evidence. No evidence has been made public that proves otherwise. What is also true is that the documented failures surrounding his death were so numerous and so convenient in their timing that the questions they raise are not unreasonable. They are the questions that official government reports themselves were forced to acknowledge as serious. Whether you believe the official conclusion or not, the story of Jeffrey Epstein's final night at the Metropolitan Correctional Center is a story about what can happen when institutional failure meets a moment of extraordinary consequence. And it is a story that the government's own documents show was never fully captured on camera. If this video gave you something to think about, hit the like button right now. Subscribe to Space Universe because every week we cover the real documented stories that the world is still trying to understand. I will see you in the next one. Until then, keep asking questions.